Listen, getting into some parenting this morning. As adults, anxiety can be a very tough thing to manage. But as a parent, what are you to do if your teenage child struggles with anxiety? It's a big one. Is it normal? And that's the big question we're asking our certified parent coach, Laura Markovitz, this morning. She joins us in the studio to shed some light on this topic. Laura, lovely to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
This is a tough one this morning, I think, because that anxiety then is something that the parents can't help but take on board. I mean, is this a ridiculous question? Is it normal for a teen? I'm trying to think back when I was that age and how I felt, and there was a lot of anxiety attached to so many things. Is that a normal state for a teenage?
And it's not a ridiculous question, because I think a lot of us are frightened. We think anxiety is this big baddie, but actually sometimes anxiety can serve us. You know, before an exam, before a first date, before we're talking about anxiety on live TV, sometimes we need a little bit of that anxiety to kick us into gear and to get us to do what we need to do. But it can be helpful to think about what's happening with anxiety. So it's sometimes helpful to know that in our brains, we've got something called the amygdala, which is kind of controls central of our survival instinct. And as soon as our brain sees something that's threatening or potentially threatening, it kicks into exactly fight or flight or freeze, and it gets us ready. It releases a whole lot of neurochemicals, which gets us ready to do that stuff. But sometimes there isn't real danger there. And that's when we're not able to control that stuff and start thinking rationally about how I can control those feelings. And that's when anxiety can start becoming a bit of a problem.
Maybe I could just ask you to maybe expand a little bit and linking onto the anxiety. What is the big difference here between anxiety and stress? Because stress, a little bit of stress is normal: exam stress, school stress, and this. I mean, is the two far apart, or is it pretty much similar?
Exactly. So exactly, we can sort of see it on a spectrum. And if you think about, you know, anxiety, that helps us, and then it goes all the way to the other side of the spectrum where it becomes potentially a disorder or a problem. And what can be helpful to think about are what are some of the symptoms? So what happens when it can potentially be becoming a problem? So we can look at some of the physical symptoms, like that racing heart, that nervous feeling in the tummy, the kind of shakiness that we start feeling, the nausea, that sort of stuff. Also cognitive things start to happen. So we have these awful thoughts, which can be sometimes catastrophizing thoughts, like, if I fail this exam, that's it, life over. Exactly. If I go to that party and I embarrass myself, it's all going to be the end of the world. So we have those awful thoughts. And then also we start seeing some behaviors that can become a problem. So nail biting, pulling hair, skin picking, exactly, all those sorts of things, avoiding behavior, avoiding certain things. And so sometimes those can be happening and we're actually going along life and it's not a terrible thing. But when those symptoms start becoming persistent and generalized, so I might be very anxious for an exam, but now I'm actually so anxious that I can't even go to a soccer game, or I can't go to a party or anything like that, that starts to worry. So it becomes really a problem that impairs daily functionality out there. And then we start going, well, hang on, there's a bit of a problem here and we need to start thinking about it.
I think it's important because you often forget, even with young children, that they're, as young as they are, they're still experiencing the same complex emotions that we experience as adults. And you just paint them with a brush, and the same thing often happens with teens where you discount it. Well, you're just a teenager, so what can you actually be stressed about? Come and walk in my big man shoes and see what the real world is like. But it is that relevant for them. But I think the most important thing is, regardless of labeling it a disorder or those patterns, it's about breaking that cycle. So I'm going to ask you to think about some very practical steps that we can employ to break that cycle as it starts to kick in, so we can start helping our children right now. But Laura, always awesome. You just took me back to my exams.
I know.
I'm just like, hang on, you can do this, dude. You can do this. I literally had to play at Pavarotti before certain exams to get my Nessun Dorma, to get myself pumped up. But you can break that cycle. So hopefully, parents, we are giving you some practical advice to approach this as well.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Right now, we are back with our parent coach, Laura Markovitz. We're talking about anxiety in teens. It's a real thing. We spoke about those symptoms that you need to recognize as a parent as well. We're continuing that conversation right now with Laura. Thank you very much, Laura. This is a big topic, eh? And a lot of teens. Is it a lot of... Do you feel like...
How prevalent is this in the work that you do?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, some research is showing that anxiety is in about 1 to 5 kids. So it's big.
Wow.
It's huge, you
We
know.
know that-
And I think it's so important that people do know it's prevalent. And as I spoke about earlier, it's a spectrum, not, you know, if you've got some of those symptoms, it doesn't mean you've got a disorder. But to know you're not alone if you're feeling these things.
I think regardless, you know, it's one thing to paint it with a brush saying, okay, you name it, it's anxiety, then it becomes a disorder, then you hand your child over to a therapist, and therapy is needed in extreme cases, but it might then prevent you from understanding fully what your child is going through. So what do we do as parents once we've seen these signs progressing from being just, you know, symptomatic to a situation, but now you reckon there is a serious anxiety problem? What do we do?
Yeah, so I'd say, you know, not for parents to kind of wait till it becomes a problem, but these are things that we should be doing, just run-of-the-mill things. So when our kids come to us with their worries, with their fears, it's so important for us to take them seriously and not diminish their fears. Exactly, not do the, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. The exam's not so important, because the reality for kids,
For them.
it is important. And they are feeling this, and it's a very real feeling. So I would say to parents, the most important thing is to be there, to listen, to hear what our kids are saying. And particularly with teens, you know, they're usually confiding in their peers. So we kind of need to be on guard and be there to listen when they are around and when they are ready to share with us what they need to be sharing with us.
Just to jump back to our previous discussion as well that we have earlier, just to recap maybe some of those telltale signs of severe anxiety that parents should go about recognizing, because we know teens, they're not necessarily going to come forward and you know, speak about their feelings.
Completely
You know,
yeah.
Absolutely. So we spoke about earlier some of the physical symptoms, the cognitive symptoms, and then the behavioral symptoms. So sometimes we're seeing kids losing their appetite, their sleep patterns are different, biting their nails, hair pulling, all those sorts of things, which in and of themselves are not necessarily a problem. But if they become persistent, so they're sticking around, they become generalized, that they actually are impairing kids' ability to function in daily life, and they are now avoiding things, then we've got to go, hang on a second, something's not right here.
I think it's important to realize through this process, and maybe there's a growth opportunity, that teens, you guys are not powerless in this situation. Maybe that shift mentally has to be with you. What advice do you give to young people that you have in this situation?
And that's such an important thing, is that, you know, for teens, for kids, young kids, and for teens to know that we can take some control of what's happening. So those thoughts that we are having, we've got to know they're not necessarily predictions, they're thoughts. So there's been amazing research that shows that there are really great things that we can be doing to impact the ability to rationalize and distance the impact between the stimulus, which is the stress and the anxiety, and our response to it. So the good news is that there are things out there. The kind of bad-ish news is that they take practice, and it's not a quick fix. So things like mindfulness training, learning to be more present, to watch those thoughts. And there are amazing apps that if kids Google mindfulness apps, meditation apps, those sorts of things. Breathing, learning to take a deep breath, hold the breath, let it go, is an incredible thing that still, the stress is there, but it helps us manage so that we're not being controlled by it. Exercising as well, getting our heart rate up.
Get the endorphins going,
Absolutely. Watching what we eat so that we've got good gut health. That impacts our mental health as well. So yeah, there are a lot of things that we can
My
be
word,
doing.
can you imagine if you can get a handle on it as a teenager, so that by the time you enter into adulthood, you can actually use these tools?
Sure, absolutely. Laura, thank you very much. A very, very interesting subject indeed. So there you have it. I hope that helped you, giving you a couple of tips this morning, maybe going into the rest of the
exam example though.
Yeah, dude. Like,
Set you off.
absolutely. But yeah, you can always connect with us on our social media pages if you have any comments or queries. I'm sure Laura will throw an eye over there and just take a look at it as well. #Expresso Show.